we came up with this idea that let's make a bicycle ride which has completely different rules than any other type of cycling that we knew about, the Tour de France or the Sunday pelotons or whatever.
Yeah,
We
the
said,
club ride. Yeah.
let's take these 5 rules that they have and just do the opposite. You have to smile all the time. Third, you have to bathe. Look at your garderobe and pick that dress that you have never had the courage to wear, because this is going to be the occasion that you put that ridiculous thing on you, or a fancy dress.
Okay.
And you know what? The bicycle, you can take it from your neighbor. It doesn't have to be yours. Just take a bicycle, find a bicycle. It can be any bicycle. Just come, be there, and we will do this tour together. And we will show people that we can cycle in any settings, any bicycle, and any kind of clothes.
Welcome to Ride to Success, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey to more productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. I'm your host, Pedro Couto Lopes. You can find me on LinkedIn under my own name. And in today's conversation, we have joined by one of Europe's most influential voices in the cycling advocacy, Pinar Pinzuti. She's a trailblazer who's reshaping how we think about mobility, tourism, gender, and urban design, and doing it all with a smile and a bicycle. She was born in Turkey, shaped her life in Germany, and now based in Milan, Italy. Pinar brings a global lens to local action. She's the director of the Cycle Tourism Show in Italy. She's a member of the Eurovelo Council and the creator of the Fancy Woman Bike Ride, a movement that brought over 500,000 women onto the streets in 250 cities around the world. Not only that, she also leads Bike Italia, Italy's most read cycling magazine, and co-founded Bikeonomist, a media company that champions the economic and cultural power of bikes. So through her work, through events, research, and education, she's made cycling visible not just as a sport, but as a lifestyle, a right, and a catalyst for change, especially in underserved areas. Now, this conversation was a powerful one. I really enjoyed chatting with Pinar. We had great fun. We bonded over the conversation, and I believe you will enjoy it too. And if you liked it, make sure you follow Ride to Success wherever you listen. Now, let's get into the conversation. Welcome, Pinar, to Ride to Success. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you.
Brilliant. So let's get started really at the roots, where you come from. So you grew up in Turkey, moved to Germany, and now live in Italy. And, that's quite a multicultural living experience, and which resonates with me as also coming from Portugal, now living in England. And I want to understand how this kind of multicultural upbringing through your life have shaped your worldview, really, and kind of your relationship with a bicycle. So why don't we start there? Like, how is this? What was this transition across different countries?
Yeah, well, growing up in a multicultural environment taught me early on that there is never just one correct way to name things, understand the world, or move through it. So language, habits, cultures, the way we express ourselves and the perspectives can be different. But the
Yes.
bicycle is not like that. So cycling is a universal language. It means and works everywhere as it is in every country, and the cyclists are fragile everywhere.
That is very true. That is true. And that's at the core of the work you do. But we'll get to that in a moment. But before we get to that, I wanted to understand if there was a defining moment in your early life that made you fall in love with a bike.
Very early, yes, I must say it. I was at the age of 10, and the bicycle that my parents gave me allowed to me to go to the neighborhoods, different neighborhoods, to visit my friends without always asking them to drive me around. So the very first taste of independency came with the bicycle, and I was free to move, just not in front of our house, but also to the other neighborhoods.
Yeah, yeah. That is a story that resonates with me, because, and it will resonate with many of our listeners, because the bicycle as is a tool for freedom. You know, as a kid, you really crave that independence from your parents. You really crave the ability to move from A to B, go further than you ever could by walking or running. And that's something that every kid wants: a bit of independence,
That
a bit of freedom. And
that's
then,
true. That's true, and that was the time I fell in love with the bicycle as a product. So it's a
okay.
means of transportation. But I fall in love with cycling later in my life. So it was around
Mm.
when I was 22. My first 2 days of bike packing in Germany and in southern part of Germany. After that, I could never get enough of cycling. Actually.
So what do you mean by cycling? When you fell in love with cycling, what do you mean by that? Because it can mean many things to many people. I don't know exactly how you define it, so I want to know from you.
It is a very simple human invention that allows us to move forward. And it's
Hmm.
faster than walking, but you're still connected to everything around you. That was for me the most important thing. And with my own power, I could really cover 80 kilometers, 100 kilometers per day, and I
Hmm.
could be where I wanted to, and I could stop where I wanted to. So that was the very first feeling of cycling that allowed me to do really whatever I wanted to. And for me, traveling is very, very important. Seeing new things, discovering new territories, meeting people, knowing things. And this was, when you move with a bicycle, when you're cycling, you do not have any filter, any barriers. So you are immediately connected from
Mm.
air that you feel to the wind in your hairs, but also with the people you met on the road, because the distance is so short between you and the things around you, and
Of
it's
course, yeah.
immediate access. So this is cycling for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a brilliant description. Something that resonates with me, and I think it was Ernest Hemingway that said that the best way to discover a country is through the power of the bicycles, through like cycling through a country to discover, and that's how you really get to know the landscape, the people, the culture, the food, everything. So it's interesting that you also describe it that way, and I'm kind of interested as well to know. Um, from your first experiences traveling and using the bike to not only just go from A to B, but also to discover new places, um, were there ever, from your personal experience, any challenges that kind of you faced? Because I'm trying to understand if there was, if you I can draw parallels between your early experience of cycling and to your work as an advocate, as on advocacy.
Okay, if I got it correct, so the connection between my childhood experience and bringing that
Mm.
experience to my professional life, right? It is,
Yeah.
I think the thing that I learned with the bicycle is this dependency of independency. I mean, that's
Mm.
creating this thing with the freedom, and I think today in my professional life, I still try to be very independent, doing everything, trying to do everything on my own with my own
Mm.
power and with my own limits, which is actually not a good thing because I reach my limits, of course, like all of us, and I'm
Yeah.
very bad at asking for help. Asking other people to guide me because I'm so this freedom in my mind. And in my personal life, I really wished I was less like this and ask
Right.
more help and stop trying to do everything on my own, because then advocacy becomes really frustrating and you might reach your burnout. That's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's definitely a life lesson there. That sometimes you have to learn the hard ways. That there's even a saying, I think, that a person doing things by themselves may be able to do it faster, but a person doing things with others will do it for longer. So there's a life lesson there for that we can apply easily but that it needs to be learned anyway. Everyone has to go through that experience in some way or another. And you you now called yourself the cycling brainwasher, and I think I want to understand why you called yourself a cycling brainwasher. I believe it's an affectionate way of describing the work you do, but I wanted for you to describe that, because it's kind of also defines a little bit of your career path. So just give us a bit of context to how do you contextualize that term?
So before I became a cycling brainwasher, or professionally, what I do as in the bicycle industry as project manager and many other things that we're going to talk about, I hope. It is. I worked in the tech industry. I started
Okay.
my career
Wow.
as an
Okay.
analyst, and then moved to business development for software companies like Salesforce, for example.
Wow. And was
And
that in Germany?
that was in Germany, and then in the
Wow.
UK. I
Okay.
used to work also as counter manager for a couple of software brands. And my job essentially was to act as a translator. On one side, I worked with the developers and engineers. On the other, with the clients who had no idea what code was or how it worked. I
Wow.
wasn't
Okay.
really only translating the words so much as interpreting the needs and context and expectations. I had the freedom to step back and understand the bigger picture and find a common language between these very different worlds, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And this role in the tech industry, especially in the development of solutions, the role taught me how to listen, how to mediate, and how to turn complexity into something very accessible and simple that everyone could speak the same language.
Mm-hmm.
And at a certain point, I also realized that this kind of interpretation we needed also for the cyclists and their issues. Um, let's say, for example, I was cycling to work with my folding bike and taking sometimes the metro or other public transportation. And I was reaching to work, and people were asking me, how can you cycle with high heels? It's not possible. And I was telling, it's possible. Look at me. And once I was at the work, they were asking me, okay, but aren't they going to steal your bike? And I said, look, my bicycle lock, costs more than my bicycle. So I don't think that it's going to be stolen. And other times when I was cycling through the weekend, people were asking me, other cyclists, but you're not dressed properly for cycling for this distance, or your bicycle is not the high end, or your shoes are not those which are fitting your jersey. And when I was climbing the mountain passes like Stelvio Pass here in Italy, which is very, very popular, and as soon
Yeah,
as I was
iconic. Yeah.
putting my foot on the ground, other cyclists were telling me, you shouldn't stop, you should just keep on, because everyone was looking at the minutes and I was looking at the landscape to take pictures. So at the end, I was living cycling more different than the people around me, actually. There was, I'm talking about 15, 20 years ago, and the community of the cyclists they were mainly men with a very certain income. That they could afford those kind of bicycles, and there were this small group of men who were doing also Sunday riding. I was an outsider in any community I was coming in. I was an outsider because I was cycling to work, not because I was missing money, because it was the fastest way for me, most convenient way. But I was seen as poor girl.
Mhm.
During the holidays, I was seen as, oh my God, she cannot afford to rent a car during her trips in Spain. I was like, no, this is the way that I want to travel because I want to leave my money everywhere and I want to relax. Or these mountain pass things, for example. So
Mm.
my seeing myself as outsider, I said maybe a lot of people see themselves outsider, and maybe this is the barrier of our cycling community, that I do not
Yeah.
feel belonging to this community. If there are many people like me, then we need to do something to make this world more accessible, and cycling needed to show many
Mhm.
different faces of it. And so there came the idea 15 years ago with, how can I normalize cycling? That
Yeah.
is for everyone, and anyone can do it, and you can do it anywhere. So this was the basics of the cycling, the career as cycling brainwasher. I started first to talk single one person at a time and try to make them try the bicycle, explain how I was doing it. Then I started to write my blog, and the very first blog in the Turkish language about urban cycling and advocacy. And then there was the magazine, and then there was the events. I tried to find any simple channel that I could use
Mhm.
to bring a different interpretation of cycling, and putting in the giving visibility to the different cyclists. It is
Yeah.
not one and only.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's important. The differentiation, because well, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to misinterpret what you said. It's like there were kind of the cycling to work was put you kind of singled you out as an outsider, and there was a clear differentiation here between the enthusiast, kind of very much on the sports end of cycling, versus the kind of more utilitarian, the mode of transport, or using a bike, moving A to B, going cycling tours, for instance. And it's kind of what you described. It seems to have led you on a journey to what planted the seed into starting to bike bike bike
Bikeonomist.
bikeonomist. That's correct. Sorry, I was getting my words muddled a little bit. Bikeonomist and Bike Italia, the magazine. Now they have to come together, but at the start they were two different identities. And kind of you have been at the forefront of Italy's kind of cycling cultural shift. And now you have also started and organizing the cycling tourism fair in Italy.
Yes.
And it's kind of, you have kind of touched and kind of in several parts of the bike industry and of the cycling tourism infrastructure you have been worked in. So it's quite diverse, your experience, and this is quite fascinating for me. And that's why I also wanted to have you on the podcast, because these presents with an opportunity to kind of dive more in the possibilities of what the bike allows us to do. That is not exclusively the sport end of what we think of cycling. And this is something that you have actually, I believe, to kind of to push the narrative in Italy, because in Italy, well, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, is like cycling was seen as a sport, and the mode of transport was not actively communicated or is not spoken actively in the media. And so this is where Bikeonomist and Bike Italia really pushed the dialogue forward. And I'm also very, very intrigued by your role as a business developer, a business manager, in working in tech companies and distilling that information from the engineers to the end customer. And that is fascinating, because it's not everyone that can do that. You have to distill concepts that are very intricate to the engineers. But for someone like myself, I don't have any engineering background. For me, that would be just gibberish. So having someone that can do the translation is really critical, so that you could put it in like terms that I can understand. And this is where I think, it comes to the question I want to ask is, there is an element of storytelling, of sharing the stories of people like yourself that have started the movement, and it is through stories that we, you as population, as humans, connect, rather than through through products, or through products. So kind of what I want to understand is, like, how did storytelling play a part in the role of growing Bike Economist and Bike Italia?
Thank you, Pedro, for this question. I mean, let's make things clear. I know it's so confusing. So, Bikeonomist, it's a bike economy, actually, two words coming together from the concept of bikeonomics, so economy of cycling. It has a claim. It is from bike to business, because in those days when we founded the company with my husband, bicycle was not associated to the word of economy. So it was no economical impact, that doesn't generate jobs, doesn't generate money and these kind of things. So, but we did know that it was doing it, but it was so invisible. Bikeonomist is a company, so it's a limited company, and it's a media company, and it has two very principal areas where we operate. One is the magazine called Bike Italia, which is today's the most read cycling magazine in Italian language. We reached 2 million visitors per month. So anything we write, we know that it reaches to people who we want to reach. And the second area where we operate is events. So it's say that it's conferences, it's the cyclotourism show. But behind these, there is one very important thing that you mentioned. We remember things which has a story. So we do not remember data, we do not remember facts, figures, but we also, with the brands and anything, it needs to be a story to be remembered by every single individual. And that creates a connection in our brain, and it's scientifically proved that if we know, once upon a time, that remains somewhere. So the idea of storytelling, actually, that came from a very simple realization. It's that we take too many things for granted, and not everyone has the tools, time, or background to research mobility policies or best practices on their own, and they shouldn't have to, actually. So people People usually come to cycling with very concrete problems. They want to be safe when they cycle. They may want it accessible, and they want it practical. So anything with that we see talk about urbanism, the speed limits, and the different types of tactical urbanism, not everyone has to study this. They have one single problem. I want to cycle from A to B, please safely, and if I can, maybe with an vehicle that is accessible, and it doesn't have to be mine. That's why we have bike sharing, which functions perfectly at the moment in Milan, for example, where I'm based. So storytelling and
I wanted to just kind of add to that, because I don't want you to kind of interrupt your line of thought, but I wanted to add that, because no one needs to be researching how to cycle more safely. It should be there, visible for everyone to see that the infrastructure is safe, because fear plays a huge part in the storytelling, and that's where for instance, in UK, the kind of the media at large, not the specific cycling media, but the media at large, more often than not portrays cycling as this thing that is kind of dangerous, and then there is a dialogue between drivers and cyclists, and then the media polarizes that, so that then there's a conflict between drivers on the road using cars versus people using bikes on the road, and they kind of try to play off each other against one another. And and me as a parent, someone else wanting to take their kids to work, or sorry, not to work, but to school. They can't take them to work, but take them to school, or just go to meet friends. They will assess first and foremost: can I make this journey safely? Do I have the right equipment? And so it's very, very basic. But if the government doesn't create the infrastructure, if then there is not the right information out there, and then it creates a huge gap between the kind of initial fear and then the kind of the realization, I believe, of what is possible to do.
So, I mean, the idea is everything needs to start from, okay, how can I resolve a problem? So if I can resolve the problem of a person, then of course that person they tend to take the solution. It is not, I can convince them with, because you're going to be very healthy. He has the problem now. He needs to get from A to B, and he wants to reach there with the most convenient way. And if he's healthy at the end, happy for him. But I can never, I mean, I don't think that we are going to convince people telling that, look, it is more social and economical benefits and whatever. What's his problem? And do I have a solution for them? And some governments are thinking for their population, their residents, and they think for them and create these solutions. And in the other countries, we have people who are asking for that. Italy is one of those countries where we as citizens, we have to make a lot of pressure and keep this always in the agenda of the politicians. That's why advocacy is so important. Also, activism is very, very important, and we try to do both. So, storytelling and education became an advocacy tool because these things help people to understand the complexity, and we can translate it in something that they can relate to and understand to. So instead of telling people what cycling should be, we try with Bike Italia, especially through our magazine, how this tool can fit in their lives and solve their everyday problems. And the events part is, for example, we have these storytelling at the cycle tourism show. We try to make people consider the bicycle as their means for their holidays, for their leisure time. And it is not enough that I say, look, how beautiful is Slovenia, how beautiful is Croatia. It is, I have to put people who has done on stage, who has done these trips, these experiences that I can relate to. So for example, I look at you, we are different, Pedro. We both cycle, but I'm sure you do different kind of cycling than I do. Your story will be heard by different types of people, and my story could be absorbed by other type of people. So I'm 45 years old. I take a week off and I want to sleep in good hotels and have a nice bike and do 60 kilometers per day because I want to stop a lot for visiting the museums and take photos and whatever. My story of Slovenia is going to be completely different from your way of telling Slovenia. Maybe the mountain biking trails, for example. So what we try to do in our events, for example, Cycle Tourism Show is a 3-day event. We put people who represent different communities of cycling communities, and then the public, they see these people and say, okay, I'm a single mom and I want to do a holiday. And oh, look, she has done the same in Denmark with her own daughter all alone. So this is something that I can relate to and I can I can do. So this is actually different types of peer-to-peer learning, I would say. And this works actually because all those people, once you convince them to go for cycling holidays, once they're back on Monday, they don't want to take the car to go to work because the positive experience that they had during their holidays, they say, oh my God, I want to keep this. And they consider all covered. They say, I covered so many distances during my holiday. Would it 5K to work? Actually, I'm going to try it with the bicycle. But in that time, we need really investment in infrastructure and safety, because those people who are so happily on their bikes, they have to get safe to where they want to
Exactly.
come
Yeah.
to.
I mean, it's a very important aspect of like conveying the emotional benefits to people of whether it is going on a cycling tour or whether it is going to cycle to work. And obviously the advocacy plays a huge role to convey that message, convey that emotional benefit to the end consumer, to the population, but also lobbying the governments to, I guess, the economic benefits. Primarily, I would believe the economic benefits that it brings to the population. And what I wanted to kind of trying to understand is from my research, cycling tourism in Italy is growing, and this is obviously has been kind of fast tracked, I believe, by COVID, and where and it's an interest parallel because in a cycling industry, sports orientated, very much fighting against the COVID whiplash, so to speak, or not so to speak. It is what it is. Whereas the cycling tourism industry is very much on an upward trend, kind of very in contrast with the opposite side of sports orientated. And these obviously brings huge economic benefits to cycling at large, but more specifically to Italy. So I wanted to understand what role do you play in convincing governments that we have this influx of people coming to Italy, but we don't have the right infrastructure to welcome them, whether it is through hotels, through information, through cohesion between tourist boards, where it is through infrastructure. So how do you play that? How do you play that game? Because you also have to convey the emotional benefit to the governments. It's not just through data and policy that you will convince them to change. And there's also an emotional level. There's also a storytelling level to lobbying, advocating, the activism parts that you mentioned. So, just can you break it down so I can we can understand a bit more how that
Yeah,
functions?
it's a huge team, actually, and I think we need to dedicate a whole podcast about cyclotourism's growth and impact. But very briefly,
Yes.
because I can, it's so what we do here in Italy in the last 5 years is we are in collaboration with the Union of Chamber of Commerce on a national level. We are doing a annual study on cyclotourism. What happens at
Yeah.
all the hotels and bed and breakfast or accommodation structures are members of the Chamber of Commerce in their local region. Then there is Regia, the coordination, which is the Union of Chamber of Commerce, and together with us, we run surveys. And these surveys allow us to understand the clients visiting these hotels, how many days they spend in the region, with what type of means of transportation they came. So if they had a bicycle or if they rented a bicycle. And
Yeah.
then average expenditure associated to every single permanence in Italy. And this report, it was having a shift of, after COVID, having a shift of 30% growth rate in the last year from 22 to 25. We have seen 54% of growth rate. The
Wow.
funny thing is, the biggest economical impact is not in northern Italy, where we have the cycling infrastructure and thematic routes and a network of routes, but it is where there is less infrastructure, because when there is less infrastructure, you cannot plan your holidays on your own. If you're coming from abroad and you don't want to waste your time or risk your most important week of the year, so if you come from Northern America, from your UK, or from Scandinavian countries, you want to make the best out of your holidays. So what do? You go to a tour operator or a cycling guide or a service provider, and you take the full package because you want to be sure where you sleep, where you eat, that you are taken care of, you don't have any mechanical problems. So you rely on local service providers, and local service providers actually are those who create the experience that you cannot really have on your own, because you don't have access to an old lady who's baking her bread in the morning and delivering it before you set off for your daily trip, daily cycling tour, for example. And here in Italy, I mean, let's say from Tuscany to south, including Sicily and Sardinia, there are hundreds of local guides and tour operators who are creating these packages and services. And there where we can really also measure the impact of it. What happens once we publish this annual report? What we do is go to region by region and say, where are the tourists, which kind of routes they use, and see, look, without infrastructure, we have this number of cyclists using, let's say, Sicily Divide, which is not an infrastructure. It is connected routes of less traffic roads, let's say. And since we have all these 10,000 people every year coming here and cycling, what if we put signposts? And what if we put more some really dangerous intersections? What would happen? People would also try to do their self-guided tours or plan on their own. So that report becomes for us an advocacy tool, because what I learned from one of the latest Velocity conferences, that my Danish colleagues said, cycling advocacy has been, until recently, always knocking the door of the municipality, regional offices, government, and asking for money to build things. Cycle tourism instead brings money and say, look, I mean, the money is there and we just need a very small of it. So now the cycle tourism advocacy is so sympathetic to everyone. They all love us and they're all ready to listen to us because it brings money. And it is the first time that the type of tourism brings good to the residents. So anything taught for the cyclists, cycle tourists, remains in the territory and becomes also something that people, the residents, can use for their mobility needs. So it's win-win for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of, it's interesting because you're coming to with this report and it's like, well, we are bringing this money, we could improve this, we could X this 2 or 3 times if there is better infrastructure, if there is better dialogue between the different organizations. So the proof of concept is already there. You want to improve it. Is there been any kind of unexpected kind of lesson that you've taken from working at Bike Italia and Bike Economist to develop these reports and work with the different organizations?
Actually, what I would love to have is comparative data with other countries, because France, for example, is doing great and they have many more cycle routes and segregated cycle paths, even more accessible. Almost everything is signposted. They do their own researches and surveys, but the parameters that the different regions are using varies from one country to another. So we can never really look at the data and say Germany does that. For example, ADFC is doing it every year. They have numbers. Italy has numbers, but published by a different kind of association. France has their own because they have physical counters on the cycle routes.
Yeah,
UK, I don't know if there are studies on this or they just
I don't know.
take. I
It's
don't know.
interesting.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
that
So
that is a
we do
huge
not have
problem. Combining the data,
that.
like aggregating the
This
data
is
so that you can compare it. And
That
yeah.
is, it would be great also to understand on European level how the countries are doing, because what we see
Mm,
in Italy is that competition with the Italian regions are bringing benefits, because like Lombardo region is in competition with Veneto region, and they always look at the numbers that if it's an increment in one region than the other, they look at the roots, they want to learn from each other. So this nice competition is helping to grow
mm,
cycling. We don't have that competition at the moment on a databases between the countries. Yes, we have it in like Germany and France and Spain, whatever, but we do not have data to compare each other. So this is lacking. I think as soon as we have a coordination on European level and have a data that says,
mhm,
look, if we look at the parameters, same parameters, then we can talk about the same data and then say, okay, Spain is doing
mm,
better and Germany is doing worse and these kind of things. So that would help also countries to start competing, because at the moment, the only competition they have in the tourism sector is the incoming numbers. So how many people landed in my country from another country? And that's a horrible thing, actually. So it's mass tourism, actually. But this is the only thing that we have, because we know how many flights are there, how many people are accessing the airports or
right.
ports or whatever. But the same
Okay.
thing with
Okay.
cycling, we do not have, because cyclists do not move in mass. So it is not like a tour bus stopping in a UNESCO site and you see 60 people getting off the bus and say, look, so many tourists. Cyclists maybe come to that UNESCO site, but they would come one by one. So in 24
Yeah.
hours, maybe there are more cyclists stopping there, but you don't have the perception of it.
Yeah.
That's why
Exactly. Yeah.
people say,
Mm.
no, cycling is a niche. No, it's not. In Italy, we have numbers.
I mean, if you are in the on the Eurovalue Council, is that something that you are actively trying to get across the board to have a uniform kind of data platform where everyone can compare easily data from every country?
Yes, it is. I mean, I don't know if the listeners are familiar with the European Cyclist Federation. It's the biggest.
No, they probably aren't. I speak for I'll speak for all of them. For the but yeah, please give us a bit of context on that.
Okay, imagine there is an office in Brussels with super brilliant professionals doing advocacy from morning to the evening, every single day of their lives. And there are more than 30 of them, the staff of ECF. And
Mhm.
what they do is every day going and knocking the door of European Parliament and Commission and say, oh, do you remember the bicycle? Do you remember to put that? Do you remember cycling tourism? So there are people, professional people in Brussels doing the job that we need to do, actually.
Yeah.
So ECF, their studies, their reports, and their annual conference like Velocity every year hosted in a different country, and the Eurovelo conference are schools for us. And I graduated from that school, actually, because
Okay.
for me, ECF was okay. This is where I can find the information that I need for my local advocacy work, because they bring numbers and studies.
Mhm.
And then the conferences where we have access to the experts from 65 countries, that they say how they manage to do things in their context, because not
Okay.
every country can take immediately the examples from Denmark or Holland. We as Italy, get inspired from Spain, for example, because
Mhm.
instead of building cycle routes, they are just reducing the speed limit and on some very particular roads, and so we can safely cycle, and the car drivers can see us, and these kind of things. So
Yeah,
my
it's such a
position
clever
in the
way of making it more more welcoming for cyclists. That's
it
knowing that there
is
are like cars
it
like
is
speeding, yeah, and kind of
yeah. I mean,
is easy to do. Yeah.
I mean, if we could change our paradigm and see cyclists as the
Hmm.
owners or human beings as the owners of the road, and car drivers, as soon as they feel like they're the guests, they will behave also differently because they're
Yeah.
not anymore the owner. So, what do you do when you go to your friend's house as a guest? You behave first of all. Secondly, you ask for rules to behave better. And you're very careful, actually. You don't want to ruin things.
You
And
say your
if
please and your thank yous.
and at the
It's an
moment,
interesting book. It's interesting concept to grasp because like in the UK, that's sometimes it feels like a food chain when you are on the road cycling. You have the drivers, and they're at the top of the food chain, and then you are the cyclist. Sometimes are at the bottom of the food chain. So like you have to kind of change that concept. It's like everyone is at the same level. Everyone brings benefits, whether you are cycling tourists, whether you're riding to work. Everyone has access to the same infrastructure. Just you need to share it equally and be respectful of each other. And it's kind of, and when you specifically think about the huge benefits that tourism bring to countries, whether it's Italy, Portugal, Spain, whatever it is, it's like it's huge. And then and you mentioned France about how well they are doing, and France, I believe France is the most visited country in the world. Yeah, so like they clearly are doing something right because they are welcoming all these people to the country. So yeah, it's very interesting to because you have to really assess what perspective you're coming, and if there is that piece of education, whether it is lobbying from the Eurovelo Council, whether it is advocating and activism at a regional level in each country, then there is hopefully there is a better understanding of the money that is kind of is that is generated through people going to work, whether it is economical, political, environmental benefits to the regions and the countries. Because yeah, cycling, even though I don't know, cycling brings a huge wealth of benefits to whether the city or the country, and then it also reduces health costs for governments. Yeah, it's how do you communicate this effectively to that becomes that whether it's through data, through storytelling, and also as you mentioned, that one of the key problems is like uniting these different organizations so that not rather than us being here doing something and then people next door doing something completely different because they don't know of the other organization doing similar work, and they're just trying to connect the dots, and so we can work together and elevate each other at the same time.
that's
Yeah, that's
true. That's true, Pedro. So back to Eurovelo. So ECF is our school,
mm,
actually. The
mm,
federation has member organizations and federations in every country. And say there's this flow of information from the countries to the federation, European Federation, and then the know-how and experience exchange from the part of the European Cyclist Federation. And the Eurovelo network, I mean, if we can think that it's in the 95s that a group of men took the map of Europe and started designing it from north to south, from west to east, with colored lines, and say we're connecting Europe by bicycle. And this was before the Berlin Wall, so Europe was not all connected. And they said, but the cycling is a key element to go over political decisions, and because at the end we want to connect people, and bicycle is a perfect means for that. And today, after 27 years of Eurovelo, seeing that this almost 70% of the infrastructure is there, those
yeah.
very first lines now became really concrete
Mhm.
bicycle paths, uniting people, but also making people dream of something. That I see that the line passes next to my house, and this just following that simple symbol of Eurovelo flag, I can arrive to Norway or to UK and or whatever. This
Yeah.
is a great thing. So but also Eurovelo infrastructure and the studies and the conditions and everything, or the certification program, we see it as a backbone to develop also the regional, provincial, and local cycle route network, because it is always very challenging, especially in the rural areas of the country. They shouldn't start from the scratch, but they have something to study. Okay, this has been done like this. We can connect our routes to this. Once people come down, then they can also deviate to our region. So it is a great thing, because the Eurovelo network is not only for leisure cycling, for long distance cyclists, but it also connects cities. So connecting
Exactly. Yeah.
cities means that connecting people for their daily mobility, actually. So infrastructure has to be taught not only in no man's land, because there will be
Yeah.
only people who are doing bikepacking or cycling holidays, but it should be really passing where there are service areas that I can use it also for my
Exactly.
daily work and whatever. So
I mean, yeah. I mean, that is a very good point, because building cycling infrastructure, whether it's bike paths and connecting countries, connecting regions, connecting small towns or big towns, there is economical benefit to that. Which is clearly labeled and is clearly it's known that it brings wealth, because you can move across landscape. And this makes me think of you mentioned about rural areas, and this is, rather than thinking, oh, we have to go through this, because you start thinking, no, we are actually opening up these places, where these countryside, rural areas, to the world, to new people coming into it. And rather than saying, oh, which is something that we have to build, and it kind of becomes a bit tiresome to have to do it, you are changing the narrative and saying, no, this is economic opportunity for these places, because it will bring wealth, it will bring new people. And then, as we mentioned earlier on, it's just people then create infrastructure alongside those routes to welcome the people traveling through it. And yeah, it's a great thing all around. It's kind of go. I think if you don't know about it, go and check the Eurovelo cycling infrastructure, because it's like very, very satisfying to look when you zoom out the map of Europe. You can see all the lines crisscrossing the multiple countries. Yeah, it's very satisfying to see, and kind of so I invite everyone to go and check it out. And I now wanted to kind of shift gears slightly, to kind of to shine a light in a very important work that you have also been part of, which is the Fancy Woman bike ride, which is run for 10 years. And you turn it into a bike ride for women, only for women, in Turkey, in a town where you originated from, and you turned it into a global celebration. And that took the span of 10 years, from 2013 to 2023. So I wanted for you to take us back to that first kind of ride, and at the risk of coming across as a bit foolish and ignorant, I want to ask you, why did you start it?
At the very beginning, I mentioned my mission of normalizing cycling. So men telling women how should they dress, what kind of bicycle they need to use, and where should they go and not go, and whatever. So there were too many don't do's in those days
They
for
still are.
people.
They still are, unfortunately. Yeah. But
And
we're working on
in
it.
the 2013 in Izmir, it was like you cannot cycle with your normal clothes. It's you have to have your gilet and you have to have your super tight lycra, otherwise you cannot cycle. This was the idea, and not everyone was fond of wearing lycra to go and fetch a bread or something. So
Yeah.
we came up with this idea that said, let's make a bicycle ride which has completely different rules than any other type of cycling that we knew about, the Tour de France or the Sunday pelotons or whatever. We
Yeah, the club
said,
ride. Yeah.
let's take these 5 rules that they have and just do the opposite. So it is only 5 kilometers distance, the whole tour.
Mm-hmm.
Second, you have to smile all the time. Third, you have to wave because there are a lot of people taking photos of you. So don't have that very serious face with sweat on your face. Third, you know what? Look at your garderobe and pick that dress that you have never had the courage to wear, because this is going to be the occasion that you put that ridiculous thing on you, or a fancy
Okay.
dress.
So fancy
And
dress. Yeah.
the fancy dress. And you know what? The bicycle, you can take it from your neighbor. It doesn't have to be yours. Just take a bicycle, find a bicycle. It can be any bicycle. Just come, be there, and we will do this tour together. And we will show people that we can cycle in any settings, any bicycle, any kind of clothes. So it was a joke, Pedro. I must confess, it was really a big joke. We wanted to have a fun ride, and we expected maybe 20 people, and then do that and say ha ha ha. No, almost 500 women showed up to the
On the
ride.
first one.
In the very first one, and we had over 50 journalists and photographers, because no one wanted to miss this chance to see all these women dressed up on their bicycles.
Wow,
so
brilliant.
the very first one was really amazing but unexpected. We didn't expect so many people, so we didn't even ask for permissions from the municipality. So it was really, oh my God, how are we going to move all these people? Everything went well. We were on every TV channel, news program, and newspaper the next day. And we received immediately other cities wanted to do the same, because they have seen that, yes, we can create a group. There are people like us, and we can also show in our city that cycling should be a very normal thing. And then from that on, it was very quickly in 50 cities and 100 cities, and then it was up at its 10th edition, 250 cities from Vancouver to New Zealand on the same day, 3rd Sunday of September, in the afternoon, almost at the same time, and involving almost 500,000 female riders.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is, when I think about the impact of that and everything that happened after Fancy Women Bike Ride in these cities, because those organizers, local organizers, became the local change makers in their cities, because they were not coming from hard cycling advocacy. We wanted to reach a different piece of community. So anyone who was already involved in hard critical mass or activism, we said, no, you are already doing a lot for other type of activism. This is another word. This is more smiling.
Okay.
So we wanted to have like housewives who had no job, because they have access to other kind of housewives or people without an occupation. So picking those people who has never been talked by cycling community, it worked perfectly. We had engineers, teachers, cleaning ladies, expats, a lot in every different city. So it grew a lot. Now these people are doing still a lot of work, like participating to the decision-making process in the municipality, because they are now considered as a road user when there are, for example, conferences or different kind of panels. They are invited to bring their perspective as women who would like to cycle safely in their city. So at least now I see, 15 years ago and today, there are more normal cyclists, female cyclists are involved in the participation process to change our road. So this is for me a great satisfaction, I have to say.
Yeah, that's the kind of the impact. Was that what the impact? So that's the impact that you now have come to understand and see happening with the result of Fancy Woman bike ride. But when you mentioned that you started as a joke, but quite quickly grew into something much bigger. That was there. Have you ever thought that it would grow that much?
Of course not. I thought we would. I thought that it was very suitable for the Turkish context, where women are under pressure for different things, and but then I have seen that it worked perfectly in Italy, it worked perfectly in Spain, even in UK. In London we had for 5 years the Fancy Women bike ride, in Sweden, for example, even in Amsterdam, because some people who move to Amsterdam, if they're not used to cycle from their childhood period on, they are not that confident in that flow of cyclists. I mean, sometimes maybe it happened to you as well. As soon as you are on a bicycle, on a cycle path in Amsterdam, you have to be very quick, very careful, because there is a mass of cyclists. So all those things intimidate newcomers, immigrants to get in the flow. So they need people to help them to understand how to behave in this traffic, cyclist traffic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it helped also even in cities where we traditionally have cycling infrastructure. All those immigrant people for the first time has been heard, and they have been seen, and I'm glad to that as well.
Yeah. You also mentioned that these women that started leading the Fancy Woman bike ride then got to be involved in their communities, be asked to contribute to their views, and involved in change making the kind of their infrastructure in their local towns. And you mentioned on the first ride there were 500 women. The next day there were media coverage everywhere. And was there ever a moment where it was there ever a moment that cycling became, or that ride became politicized, or as a tool to just, I don't know if I'm asking this too correctly, but because cycling is often politicized, because I mentioned earlier on about media galvanizing opinions, in the kind of for the general population. And I can well imagine that this would be the case with cycling, having 500 women cycling through a local town in Turkey, being quite a political event in itself. But so I'm not kind of verbalizing this properly, but what I want to understand is if there was direct implications then in government, whether it was to create better infrastructure, whether it was to look at the bias in society, look over inequality in society towards women. Was there kind of some change in that respect through the kind of the ripples effects of the Fancy Woman bike ride?
Yes, it's a tough one. So we have done things very well, but randomly. I mean, it was a coincidence that it worked all very well, because um, since we wanted to include people to this ride which were not included in other type of cycling scenes, we wanted to be super transparent and super accessible. So we said, we are not leftists, we're not rightists, we are not from the social party or not from the other party. We have no political label on us. Even we also avoided to people to call us feminists because it was
Right.
too easy to label female cyclists those days.
Yeah.
So they said, okay, you are against the violence on women. So actually, this is something else. You're feminist. No, we are not actually. We are normal people who would like to cycle safely. So too many
Hmm.
labels to categorize us were there, ready to
Yeah.
put on us. But we said, no, look, this is actually like a party, but you have to come to that party by a bicycle. And we just
Right.
leave the
Okay.
front rows to the female riders, and men were we welcomed them, but we asked them to make themselves useful, like taking photos and videos, and do not just lead the group, but be behind the
Yes.
group. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it was these kind of requests. What happened is we never accepted sponsor. We never accepted a brand logo. We have never accepted any kind of label or logo on our
Hmm.
event. So it made it very pure. So everyone was welcome. Any kind of association could participate or political party, but we asked them to please do not ruin your look with stupid flags and logos. So don't come with a
Right.
jersey
Okay.
or branded thing. So put your best clothes on and come to that. What happened is this is also really a coincidence because we didn't think truly on this. But once you have 500, it was the first year, the latest edition, we had over 6,000 female riders at the starting point of the ride. What happens is the journalists come, the TV come, and they ask you one thing: why are you here? That
Yeah.
answer is so important. If you say, because we're cycling here, no, you have your press release with 10 bullet points, and you say, we want this, 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 this. So the group, you collect these people with a promise of having fun. But once you have the mass, you have to be very clever to use that mass to move things, to move stones. And on that day,
Mhm.
our first request was European Mobility Week, because it was in the European Mobility Week. We want our municipality to organize things, alternative mobility options to the citizens, not only car, but blah, blah, blah. We want to celebrate World Car Free Day. So at least once a year, we want a city
Yeah.
center without cars. So you make this list of things that you require, and you repeat it every year. And then you see that the 4 of the 10 bullet points is realized. This is what
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah. Exactly. I guess you achieve critical mass, and then that message becomes loud and clear to government organizations, because you are, it reaches to the point where you can't ignore it, and that's the unfortunate kind of reality of government. You have to reach a certain number of the population to get to be heard, and and also there's like this level of activism, and you've been very active, from what I understand. And you mentioned earlier on about burnout. That was very quickly inserted into the conversation. But I wanted now to kind of understand a bit more about that, because activism is a lot. You need a lot of dedication, a lot of time that comes in with it, and you don't necessarily see the results tomorrow or next year. Sometimes it takes decades to actually see any meaningful change, because you are working within governments, you're leading with the bureaucracy, backlash. So I want to understand, how have you stayed resilient through kind of the ups and downs of of your career?
Yes, that's true. 15 years in advocacy. I think staying resilient, it comes from focusing on positive impact. I stopped worrying about the things do not work, but the things
Right.
that started to work, and seeing people, discovering people who enjoy cycling,
Mm-hmm.
and then knowing that these people are going to be advocates in their own community is the thing that makes me keep on doing this. Because there are two types of cyclists. One type of cyclist is cycles for him or herself. It's their pure joy, their thing. They want to keep it. They don't want to do the advocacy work, activism work. They would never really even participate to the manifestations. And there are other people who cycles for themselves and want other people to cycle safely. So these people, they are involved in too many things, and we need more of these people. But to grow the number of the advocates, we need to grow the number of people who choose cycling. So it's it's this.
Have you ever faced burnout through the work? Have you ever been at the point where you're like, this is too much?
Yes, and I know also how to the medicine. I know.
Okay, yeah.
For example, at the moment, I'm really, really tired and not frustrated, but really at my limits. And I know what's going to do well to me. A week of cycling.
Very
So
good.
this is what I'm going to do at the end of the year, and the very first days of the year, I will be cycling. And this reminds me, I mean, the joy that brings it to me also helps to bring joy to my work. And I also remember why I'm doing this. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Brilliant. It's cycling as medicine. It's a brilliant way of putting, but it also puts in perspective that, we all lead sometimes stressful lives, and some what you're describing is that kind of that breaking point. You need a release, and the release here is the bike, traveling, having like the moment to yourself, and that's the beauty of the bicycle. As you know, is that it gives them the freedom to explore, gives them the freedom to be with our thoughts, be in the present, and that's something that in today's society, where everything is grabbing your attention, everything is demanding your time, being the moment, being with your thoughts, it's quite kind of empowering almost, if nothing else, is liberating from everything else. So, well, thanks for sharing that, because I imagine it comes from a very kind of a vulnerable place, and kind of also puts in perspective the work you do. It's not all the ups, but also kind of ups and downs. I think I wanted to ask as well. It's you've been talking about the past and the work you've done up to today. I wanted to look into the future. Looking ahead, what is for you the big ideas, the big shifts that you think and hope that will help bring more people to ride bikes, whether it is next year or in the next decade?
I think what I wish, this is wishful thinking, and this is my wish, my desire, and I don't know if
we
I'm
all
going
need to have hope. We all
we
hope
all need to
is
have
critical.
hope. I really hope that our cities and our roads will be designed with the thought of, okay, everyone should be using this. So any kind of new infrastructure should be thought for people who want to walk, cycle, or drive. But all of these three users of the road should be having the same rights and same comfort and same safety. Because if we give people the different options, I think they're going to choose the one which is more convenient for them. I would never think of putting something, forcing people to choose one, but giving people the options that they could choose the right one for themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. And I want also to, as you have been in a position of leading teams, leading organizations, I wanted to understand from your perspective as a leader, what qualities do you need to bring to your everyday, to your team, to lead them?
Mm-hmm. This is cool. We are 15 now at My Economist. Most
Yeah.
of the people are working in the editorial team. What we have seen, I'm going to tell this for the first time in a
Okay.
podcast. What we have seen is the publications focused on cycling are mostly where men work, and they write
Mhm.
articles about other male cyclists or male issues. We wanted to have a different magazine, and in our editorial team there are more female writers than the male writers, and our female
Mhm.
readership has grown in the last 3 years. So we are seeing this impact of
Wow, brilliant.
changing the language and the topic, but also approach to cycling. Let's say the only one example, we receive bicycles to test, for example, in the
Mhm.
company. Our articles are not about the product, but what we do with the product.
Mhm.
Uh, which kind of problem can I resolve with this bicycle? Because I mean, today in 2025, almost to 2026, there are no bad bicycles. All bicycles are perfect. All bicycles are good. So who am I to tell that? This is maybe this is this,
Yeah.
but I can say this resolves my problem, or this cannot resolve my problem because I need a different type of bike. So we're focusing on
Mhm.
this. Also, when we interview, for example, the business people, the approach is completely different. We instead of asking the story of the product, we're asking the story of these people who build these products, and they're
Yeah.
always great. No one asks them.
Yeah.
And we also try to give a lot of visibility to female professionals in the
Mhm.
sector, because also they are lacking opportunity to tell their own opinion. So also together
Mhm.
with the Women in Cycling Initiative, where I know also
Yeah.
Isabel Eberlein, the European initiative, we are trying to put more female professionals in the sector, in the bike sector, so that the not only the storytelling, but also the design of the product can be rethought and replanted, reprojected for different users and different types of people. So I think I'm expecting a lot of change in the next decade, because there are more and more people interested in working in the industry, and they are ready to change. I mean, they're ready to also put theirs on it. So it's not like, okay, bicycle has 200 years, it has always been like this and it's going to be like that. No, why cannot we make a tool for purpose use? For example, why do I have to have 7
Yeah.
bicycles at home and do this and this? Why can I have maybe one bicycle with that bicycle with a couple of accessories or components that I can switch and use it for more things? Um, yeah, I think good things are going to come, because
Yeah.
we have more courage to say ours. Also, female professionals have the more, and we have a bit more of diversity in the companies, and
Yeah.
this will have an impact on the product itself as well, and also who designed the mobility or infrastructure. There are always more and more people from different backgrounds telling theirs. So I think, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, that's brilliant to hear that. I mean, it is proven that having a more diverse force, more, whether it is from different diverse backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, more women, it proves to prove for a brand, a company to be more profitable, to be more productive with, and also it's like the story changes, as you mentioned. It's like you're not focusing, you're focusing on what actually really matters. And when you have a population that is 50% or 51% female and has a lot of the buying power, you want to be talking to the people, to the women that make those buying decisions. And a man is not best placed to do that. You have to have females doing that, whether it is through storytelling, whether it is immediate representation, whether it is through product development, infrastructure. Yeah, I mean, we do. Yeah, there's multiple examples of great work being done by women, and that has been and doing. And now, case in point, we are me having a conversation with you. Like it's so just it's just making sure that we are giving enough representation and giving kind of shining a light on the right people, on the
Yes,
right
and
women.
Pedro, I would like to, it's not only gender, it's also age. For example, we need more
Yeah,
people from different age to represent the category because Europe growing older and older, and we will have all these old people who
yeah,
needs their independency, mobility independency, because I mean, once we have get rid of our kids, we do not need to drive them around, then we're going to have our parents that we need to drive around. But I hope that my parents have this safety by walking or cycling, that they can still do their daily things on their own,
yeah,
but they're not represented at the moment. So nobody is really thinking about, oh, okay, how am I going to resolve the problem of over
yeah,
65 in the next decade, that they still need to go from A to B and nobody's really thinking
yeah.
about them.
Yeah, that's a very important. Like marketing. That's a huge opportunity you have. It's kind of in England. I think you call it the empty nesters. But I might be saying that wrong. But 55 and over, where kids have left home, you now have more disposable income. You want to have more experiences, and you're still at the age that you can do most of the stuff that you would do at a younger age, and you have more money to do it with. So it's a huge opportunity as well there, for sure. I wanted to kind of bring this whole conversation to kind of a point where I ask all kind of which hopefully summarizes the personal journey and the essence of the person in some way. And the question I ask of all my guests is the following: what does success personally mean to you?
Oh, having impact.
Yeah,
Yes. If I have an impact, it doesn't have to be a global impact like Festival Bike Ride. It can be a small impact on my neighbor. It can be a small impact on my colleague who
yeah,
decides to cycle to work because she or he has seen what we have been doing here. It can be a small impact on the politician who is sitting at the Milan municipality and one day decides, oh my God, I never considered this. We should put this in the agenda. So impact, having
yeah.
impact.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's actually it's a very good way of defining success. Not that there is like a right or a wrong way of defining success. There is not that such thing, but you know, it kind of aligns perfectly with the fact that you have a strong purpose in your life, through the work that you've done, and that purpose then translates into the impact, whether it is the person working next to you, whether it is whether it is a community, whether it is a country, wherever it is, but that purpose then leads to impact and it creates a ripple effect. So a brilliant way to describe success as having impact. So now we come to the point in the podcast where I started a tradition on a podcast where every guest leaves a question to my next guest, not knowing who they are. So the question that was left for you is the following: is there anything you would have done differently in the past month?
In the past month,
Yes.
how much time do I have? I need to think about it. Uh, yes, there is one, but it has nothing to do with cycling.
I've done that. That's fine. I mean,
Is
I
it
don't know.
okay? It is okay. I
Yeah, yeah.
mean, me and my husband, we have done something that we decided not to do anymore. Starting a Netflix series which has more than one season, and we started
Right.
with one with 8, and we gave it up on the second and said, no, we can still do good and quit it here and just stop wasting our time. It has nothing to do with cycling. Now I dedicate that time on reading.
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's it's something that that you have addressed and you have changed the course of that. You could
Yes,
could
yes.
easily
So it is not
binge
that, oh my
watch that
God,
series.
yeah, it's not like, okay, but we have already started, let's bring it to the finish. No, you can always turn back from your mistake and, yeah, you can still repair that damage.
Yeah, no. I mean, it might seem like a simple like thing that but in fact is like everyday thing that happens in our lives. You start a Netflix series, but you can easily binge watch, but you decided no. I can do this. I can use my time to with a more productive purpose. And that analogy that you gave about mistakes happen, things will fail, but it doesn't mean that you have to carry on with that failure or that down that route. You can easily deroute, change course, do something else. And that's a brilliant analogy to life, to work, to like having a purpose. Being on a trajectory in your life doesn't mean that that's it. You start a year, you're going to die doing this. No, he can change whenever you want. So it's
Yes,
a
you
brilliant
can get
analogy.
off the car. You can get off the car and hop on a bicycle. You can always do that. You don't need to carry on.
Brilliant way to wrap the conversation. Bring it back to the bike. Pinar, it's been a real pleasure chatting to you and getting to know your purpose and the impact that you've had so far, and I believe you'll continue to have. So yeah, a huge thank you for sharing your time with us and your insights.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you to you.
If this conversation sparked something in you, maybe a fresh perspective on movement, activism, or on your own journey, share it with 2 friends who might be ready to rethink how they move through the world too. And make sure to follow Ride Success wherever you listen to the podcast. This is the best way to stay connected with the stories that move, challenge, and keep you going. Until next time, stay active, stay curious, and keep riding to your own version of success. Thank you for listening.